Howdy, everybody. Jim Benton, CEO of Chorus. Thanks for joining us for the weekly briefing, our weekly chance to really unlock the insights behind the conversations. Today, I am joined by Dan Wardle, the VP of Revenue at Vidyard. Hey, Dan, how are you today?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, appreciate you joining us and sharing some of the insights. I'd love to hear just a little bit about the composition of Vidyard and the sales and kind of the motion that you have there.
For sure. Yeah, so we are a video platform for business, from marketing to sales to internal communication. We're approaching 10,000 customers. About half of them are kind of online self-serve pro customers, and the other half are more enterprise traditional customers. And then we've got 3 million plus users of our platform on the free side. So if you do want to use video, you can go to vidyard.com/free. A little plug there. Our team, we have about 50 salespeople plus the customer success team that manages all those enterprise customers, and all the pro side is kind of managed on an automatic basis.
Dan, I'm curious about, during this time, we have a lot of work from home. We both have a passion for video, but from a Vidyard standpoint, how are you seeing teams use video today? What's been different over the last few months?
I think the biggest change in the last few months is just it's gone from a nice to have to a mandatory. You can no longer go visit your customers, so you have to be using video to still make that same kind of personal connection. Before this chat, we were talking about executive offsites and things and how much they've changed and how you can use video to try to offset some of those meetings. You don't have to have a meeting to go through a PowerPoint. You can just send the PowerPoint in a video. And it's the same thing with sales. I think a lot of people always thought video was that first touch, get somebody to click play, get somebody to respond to you. But now it's, after your demo, after your discovery call, you need to follow up with a video because you can't schedule an on-site next week with them. And that's going to be the same for the next few years, probably.
Did your team typically sell over the phone before? Did you do in-person meetings? What was the motion from a field standpoint?
Yeah, we were primarily on the phone beforehand, but we were very inside centric. So we had an office, everyone was there every day. There was very little work from home, but our sales was mostly remote. We did a lot of Zoom, a lot of demos over the phone, the occasional customer meeting, a lot of events where we would meet people, try to meet as many people as we could as an event instead of doing individual travel. So the travel aspect hasn't changed a ton for us, but it is still something we're getting used to.
Anything that surprised you about your own team's productivity over the last few months that you maybe didn't see coming?
Yeah, I think water cooler chat takes up a lot more time than you think. And now that it's gone, the reps are even more productive. And not only on sales, but marketing, like they are crushing their productivity in all aspects of our business right now. And so, that fear of work from home because you can't see somebody at their desk is completely gone, because the productivity of reps being at home, being able to meld their own schedule, deal with family situations, whatever it is, far outweighs the coffee chats and the water cooler talk at work and the amount of time that takes.
Well, I'm curious. We've all been talking about water cooler. I saw the Journal had a great article this weekend about, the next thing we're trying to reinvent as a tech community is the water cooler. Overall productivity, when we look at meetings across the board, has held fairly steady. I think Q3 with the summer, we've seen a bit of a dip, and I think we'll see it come back this month now that we're kind of out of summer. But I'm curious from your standpoint, and as you've seen productivity go up, what have you been doing to kind of keep those levels high and to keep the engagement strong? As you mentioned that you're seeing that increase in productivity right now.
I think the one big change I've seen from before is customers and prospects are more willing to set a regular meeting with us. So we have one large enterprise that's got a weekly Wednesday meeting with us every week, even though they're, looking to buy in 2021. It's a long range deal, but they want to keep engaged. They want to make sure that they're being held accountable. Whereas in the old world, we would have traveled there once a quarter, done the big dog and pony show, and then left and probably never talked to them for the next little while. So we're finding customers are actually more willing to meet. I think, that reduced number of meetings over the summer, we have felt a lot of vacations. People kind of weren't doing anything until July and August, and now they're feeling safe enough to go on a little trip, take a little vacation time with their family. But overall, I think that dip is probably caused more by industries that are being impacted by the pandemic versus industries like ours, which seem to be actually in a positive swing.
Let me ask you, because we were talking about this internally. Have you taken, we were talking about our team. Have you snuck out for the vacation yet this summer?
I did. Yeah, I took a big two-week road trip all through northern Canada.
Good for you. I love it. I keep hearing from the team, the more that we as leaders do that, the more it's helping to just encourage our teams to do it. So um, I'm jealous. That's awesome. Well, Dan, jumping into, a little bit more on the understanding of the sales cycle as we dig into the revenue side. One of the areas that we're looking at is just overall sales cycles. What do they look like? What's the median number of days from first to last call? And what we've seen over the last few months is that there's been an increase. And I will acknowledge that when we look at the 2019 data, it had a similar pattern during the summer months. We do find that it takes longer for these deals to close. I'm curious your perspective when you think about what's maybe driving the length in terms of days between one as well as on the lost deals.
I think there's two aspects that we're seeing. Number one is, and we're doing it internally as well, so we can blame ourselves. We are making sure that we're making the right decision when we're buying tech. We don't want to make a misstep because who knows what's going to happen with the economy and things. So you're being like extra cautious before making a purchase, having that one extra meeting with the CFO involved or the CEO involved just to get a final decision on it. So there's that aspect of it, which is just adding that one extra piece. And then the other side is people are being extremely cautious on info security. So if your platform at all touches personal data, we're seeing an increased level of questionnaires and digging into that. As we move to a digital world, now everything is cloud-based and they're being just extra careful with personal data, plus a lot of the breaches that have happened lately in the news. So those two things combined is kind of what we're seeing, plus summer, just vacations.
On the info security side, have you seen any unique innovations to help drive that process or anything you've been doing to help speed that along during this period?
Yeah, our security team has created a package that we send, and we hope that addresses all their needs and we don't have to do their big questionnaire. No. As soon as you get into the thousands of employees, larger companies, they ignore that and send you the questionnaire anyway. So then what we've done is we bought this platform called HyperComply, which basically recognizes all the answers we've filled out continuously on all these other info security and then fills out the answers. So then my solution consultants can check the answers, security compliance person gives a final checkbox on it, and we can send it. That's increased our time to fill that out by 10x, not having to type all those answers. So that's really helped.
Yeah, look, I appreciate you sharing that. I think the other area that I wanted to get your perspective on is just the number of meetings on each of the closed deals. So if we look at the number of meetings, it's also up. We're finding that we're meeting more. And I think your opening story about the enterprise, where you're just having more frequent touches, it's easier to meet right now, but we're finding a 10% increase in the average number of meetings on the closed won deals, as well as a 9% increase in terms of number of meetings and even on the deals that we're not winning. Is this consistent with what you're seeing, and what do you think is driving this?
I think it's also back to that point of that one extra meeting just to make sure they're making the right decision. We're finding that even on our SMB team, where it used to be kind of a discovery demo mix and then the decision call with signature because they're really small companies. We're now seeing like the next one, which is C-level, just to do the final ROI check. So there is that extra meeting. I think it's also just the ease of meeting. Instead of having to schedule an in-person, everyone's got 15 minutes to throw in Zoom, and people are just more willing to do it nowadays.
I think it's right. We've seen, the data that we have shown before look specifically at the executive. So we showed this back in July, but you mentioned this, we were up 108% on the buying side, joining meetings. And I think that's what is driving the more touches and the more diligence. And then the selling side, it was up 65% in terms of people, being involved, which is driving, and extending the sales cycle just a bit. The other area that I want to get your perspective on is the sales process. When we look at the average number of days between meetings, it's held fairly steady. So it's basically a week and a half is what we typically see. It increased a little bit in July during the summer months. What do you typically see? So we're seeing 7 days is the average number of days between meetings. What's typical for your team?
I would say that's about average for our team. The SMB team, a little bit tighter. We try to keep it in the same week. And I know like Salesforce.com has a stat where if they book the meeting more than 72 hours out, there's a high likelihood people don't show up to that meeting because they're just not engaged. And that's what you're seeing here. When you lose a deal, they're less willing to meet with you more often. And it should be an indicator to you that they're really not invested. I still remember, my first VP of sales would always say, if you were on site with a customer and you actually met a customer on site, the deal close rate will go up. And it's not because you met them on, maybe you're a really nice guy, but that's probably not the reason. The reason is that they were willing to have you in their office. And it's the same thing here. If they're willing to meet with you once a week, you'll have a better chance of closing. If they're like, oh, let's meet in a couple of weeks, it should be a red flag for you.
Yeah, it's a huge sign, isn't it, of just the overall momentum of how these deals are progressing. One of the other areas, Dan, I want to get your perspective is we look at just overall performance of our teams. How do we communicate the value of the sales process? One of the areas that we've looked at specifically is when does the demo start? So using Chorus, we can understand sort of the initial discovery, but when do we actually get into the slides? And we're finally seeing it return back to levels that we saw back in February, which is the demos typically start at about minute 10 now, and they had increased to about minute 12. We think we saw a little bit more empathy in Q2. How do you think about this, and how do you leverage demo within your own sales process?
We have two teams, the SMB team and the commercial team or enterprise team. On the SMB team, 10 minutes, is kind of the minimum we want. We want them to do as much discovery as they can up front, but then get into the screen share. Got my daughter coming in here. This is real life. But I think what I've found reviewing calls recently is people aren't bantering anymore about the pandemic. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the change in that timeline. It's not, good or bad. It's just different. And I think you still need to make sure you're making a personal connection at the beginning, but let's not reference the pandemic every time anymore. Let's find something more relevant, more personal to talk about, while also making sure that 10 minutes is used for discovery, not just banter. Let's actually understand the customer's problem before you start to demo or screen share or whatever it might be.
You mentioned you have two teams from SMB and enterprise. On the enterprise side, how do you typically run that motion in terms of talk time versus demo time, and when do you do the demo?
Yeah, so the enterprise side, we try to keep that first meeting strictly to a discovery. Now, we call it a disco show. Sometimes you may show something near the end, last 10 minutes, just if they haven't used the platform. That being said, because we have a free product, a lot of the discoveries we do, they're already familiar with our platform. So they don't necessarily need that demo on that first call. And then we schedule the next call where we have 4 or 5 people from the decision-making team and a solution consultant really making a personal demo. And we'll start screen sharing basically in the first minute, because we bring up the slides that are reconfirming the knowledge of their discovery and their pain points, and then get into the demo after that.
I'm curious from an ROI standpoint. You've mentioned you're seeing more CFOs join the calls today. Our data has shown a 92% increase in CFOs joining calls. How are you thinking about the ROI side and communicating value, and as some have called it, extreme value? Have you had to do anything different in your motion currently?
I think we were pretty well set up. All of our case studies really show increased response rates with video, increased close rates with video, time to close gets reduced with video. And so we just reference that constantly. And the interesting thing is, before it was, you would say it and people would believe you or not. Nowadays, obviously, if they can't go on site, then you have to use video. So they hit home a lot faster now. And we just keep getting more and more of those case studies. So we try to do it as opposed to talking about ROI calculations, that kind of thing. Our platform is more finding the case study that is in that person's industry, so they believe that their customers will receive video well. Some people believe info security teams don't like video. It's not the case based on the data we're seeing in our customer base. And so it's just a bit of a different one compared to, when I bought Chorus, it was like an ROI calculation. If I can get my BDRs to convert at 0.2% higher to opportunity, then here's what the revenue will look like. And it was an easy decision. On the Vidyard side, it's a bit more, this is like redesigning your sales process. And here's the examples of how you're going to do that.
Yeah, it makes sense. We've been studying the conversations overall, just looking at ROI mentions and kind of the broader context of ROI mentions. And, it increased from February to March. July to August, it's kind of back down to steady state level. So it's consistent with what you're sharing. I think there's a big focus on this, and how we communicate this value is unique for each company at this point.
Yeah, this is a good one to watch out for, though. If you have the data, if you use Chorus and you see your team not mentioning it as much, you got to get on them.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, Dan, I'm curious, just as we close up, any perspectives as we think about the second half of this year and how Q3 is going to close in general in this market, and if we go into Q4, where do you see things going over the next few months?
For me, and this has been since the beginning of all this, we always used to talk about our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and they're in this industry, they're this size company, they use these tools. We now have to think about their ICP, the second level. And so when we develop, our account-based marketing plan or account-based sales plan, we had to really vet all of those accounts to see who are their customers. Because you really have to think there are some industries that are not going to come back quickly or at all. And so you need to understand who your customers are before you figure out who to target. And I think that's why we've gone, basically my entire BDR org is now an ABM org, because we need to make sure they're hitting the perfect people who have the right things going for them with their customers as well. And I really think that's what's going to make companies successful the rest of the year.
I think it's a fantastic point. The data, when we look at by segment, by specific verticals, demonstrates what you're talking about. Some are down 30%. And if they're on your ABM list, they're just not buying right now for the most part. And so being hyper targeted is super thoughtful, and we're seeing that across the space. Dan, I appreciate the time. For those that have listened today, you can join us at Chorus.ai to download the materials that we have here. And Dan, wish you a great rest of the week. Thanks for joining us.
You as well. Thanks a lot, Jim. Talk to everybody soon.